And good morning, everybody, and good afternoon or evening in whatever time zone your brain is currently occupying. And welcome to, if you're here live, the best Sunday of your life so far. So far, it's the best Sunday of your life. There are going to be better Sundays in the life, I promise. Oh, by the way, I think I can get rid of this microphone. Can you all still hear me? If you can not, let me know. I'm trying a different setup today. I'm trying to, that whole idea of complexity. I'm trying to compress things into a more, should we say, efficient system. And there's some reason for that that will be beneficial to the subscribers on Substack and on locals. Thank you, Thomas. Thomas tells me on Substack he can hear. And thank you, Jess, as well. So yes, there's going to be some things coming up in the near future that me and a couple people are helping me are working on a structure. But before that, before we start, I do want to start with Canada's new land acknowledgement. So grab your cup and get ready for those of you who are here to celebrate with a sip in honor of our friend Scott Adams, who has departed as of a month, 2 days ago. Really, man, time flies. Miss that guy. So, on behalf of all Canadians, we'd like to gently acknowledge that we're standing on the traditional territory of, well, yeah, whoever was savagely killing each other here at the time. Anyway, they aren't in charge anymore. We're here until the Americans take over. Sip. Isn't it always good to start your day with a little bit of humor? I'm still waiting for the radical leftists to go crazy. But by the way, that is as scripted as everything else in politics. But we'll talk about a little bit more about that in the future on a future stream. You ever have a dream about somebody you knew, but you can't remember who they were, and it was such a vivid dream? That was my night last night. It's pretty. I'm going to talk more about that. I might do that on kind of the night stream, which we're working on putting together. I know it's never interesting to talk about people's dreams, and it's not that; it's the process and the mechanism. So I never dream at night until something recently, an event a few months ago, and now every time I go to sleep, I'm in deep REM sleep, and I want to thank the person for inducing that without telling me that that's what he was doing. So quite brilliant and quite positive. I know that sounds a little cryptic, but if you are a paid subscriber to Locals and or Substack, then you'll understand as I kind of walk through that a little bit in the future. And yes, that does relate to persuasion and communication. We're going to package all this stuff. We're just trying to figure out what's happening with Discord. Discord apparently was going to initiate some sort of process with IDs that you can imagine people on Discord are so unhappy with. They're not pleased with that there were so many people canceling their Discords a few days ago that their servers crashed. So I don't think that's going to happen. And that might relate to Marco Rubio's speech yesterday, which we're going to discuss in a couple of minutes. Somebody asked me just a couple of things that have come up recently, when the last few hours. Somebody asked me about my take on bad Spanish accents, and I said something like nails on a chalkboard. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I never would have imagined this as well, but when you learn a new language and you learn how to speak in their accent, or as close as you can get to with your native tongue, when you start to hear people like, you see this a lot in the U.S. People, if you learn Spanish and you learn how to pronounce Spanish properly, when people they pronounce it like gringo Spanish. Hola, como estás? Is supposed to hola, como estás? It becomes nails on a chalkboard, and it's really this interesting phenomenon. You see people who don't know Spanish, and they think people, when they enunciate in Spanish within a Spanish accent, they think, oh, you're just being you're being a little bit of a prat, I guess. But no, that's not what it is. It just becomes natural to you, and it's pretty wild. So I'm a big proponent of people to always learn a second or third language. I guess this is my, would you say I speak two and a half languages? No, yeah, two and a half. I could pick up the other third in a few weeks easily because I learned as a young age. That's another issue. Apparently, we'll talk about this more on the next stream, I think. But Rupert Lowe has announced Restore Britain as a political entity in the United Kingdom, released a very interesting video that I think is going to make the people on Blue Ski a little upset. But apparently, Jeremy Clarkson may join Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain party, which would be absolutely massive. So, there you go. There's that pushback we've been looking for in the cultural war. I mean, most of my life, that we're starting to see people from all walks of life to say, you know what, I've had enough. So that's something to be positive about. And so I always talk about positivity and hope. Yeah, we'll talk about some negative things that are going on, but I think we're in transition to a more positive space for most of the world. So I think we have a lot to celebrate. Tonight is the 200th episode of Not On Record. You can follow Not On Record on X, on Twitter, on YouTube, Not On Record podcast. And just for people who don't know, this is 200th. This is a big episode, obviously, for any podcast. But this is a podcast that deals with false accusations and the legal system. And we try to explain how the legal system actually works, not how some people on the internet want the legal system to work, but actually how it is practiced. This is very important, in my opinion, especially they focus on defense of false accusations and that sort of thing. So that's kind of another way that I and others are trying to contribute to helping people understand, the broader culture war and how we're going to fix things, because the legal system is an important part of that. A couple of things to review. So yesterday, I talked about this idea of captured media. It was yesterday or the day before. I think I covered both days. Legacy media versus alternative media is no longer the correct paradigm. It is now captured media versus non-captured media. And that's just probably because you've seen such an aggressive move to capture what was alternative media. Podcasts, YouTube channels, Rumble streams, all that sort of stuff. And I explained that before February 2022, which was a significant date, that was the massive pivot for many, let's say, competing entities, that they decided they need to capture alternative media. So both you're welcome and I'm sorry. But yeah, it had a lot more to do with things than people realize in terms of the messaging framing around the world. That's something, Scott Adams and I think we talked a little bit privately online, and we definitely been involved in things that people had no idea we were involved in. And Scott took some things to the grave, and I can speculate as to what some of those things were that he was either involved with or behind. That is the power of knowing how to communicate to the human operating system. Anyway, so the machine decided to focus on alternative media and capture podcasts. And this issue is going to come up more and more, which is why I bring it up. And once you see this, you can't turn away. You can't turn it off. Once you see it, you will see it everywhere. It is pervasive in our current media culture. The Epstein cognitive dissonance test. There's another one. I posted something on Twitter. I'm going to start posting in kind of the left-wingy discords and blue skis that I follow. And it was, I put up a picture of Jeffrey Epstein, one of those infamous pictures of him. And I asked, is this the world's most famous Democrat? Right? You want to slip them into cognitive dissonance, then you shine a mirror on them. And that mirror is that as much as because they're trying to put all their effort on the political ones, Trump, even though it seems very evident that Trump apparently called the police or the FBI. I think he tried to report Epstein to the FBI. But regardless, and who knows the motivation, I don't know if that motivation was the property deal or not. Who knows? That's between them. But the idea is just put his picture out there repeatedly, repeatedly, and don't do it on Twitter because there's not enough Democrats on Twitter. You got to go to where they are, and that is Bluesky or the left wing echo chambers online, their discords, their Telegram. Well, they don't use much Telegram, but just put Jeffrey Epstein's picture and just ask them over and over again, is this the world's most famous Democrat, or is it Bill Clinton? And put a picture of the two of them together. So that's which one is the most famous, right? They'll because that's something the subconscious can't unsee, and it'll make them a little bit crazy. Cuba, we'll talk a little bit more indirectly because we're going to talk about Marco Rubio. But you talk about payback on behalf of the exiled Cubans around the world. I just, I think we should all feel a sense of pride and hope for them. Can you imagine? Just imagine what it's going to be like in, I don't know, 2027 or 2028. Imagine yourself in 2027, 2028. And Cuba and Venezuela are now aligned with completely the United States and the Western world in some way, shape, or form. Who knows the structure that is going to be in Cuba? My guess is it's going to be similar to Puerto Rico, but who knows? I mean, that would be great for them, right? Firstly, do you see how much the world is changing? And just as a point of how much the world is changing, imagine it's 2027 or 2028, and you will be considering, like I would, which country should I visit first, Venezuela or Cuba? Think about that. How far we have come that we would consider, or we're beginning to consider, hey, I think I'd like to see Venezuela. I would like to go to the Margarita Islands, which are apparently one of the most beautiful islands in all of South America. Janice is Bluesky. Yeah, it's Bluesky. It's it's Soviet Twitter. It's not Blue Sky, it's Bluesky. But yeah, just I think these are things that we should be celebrating and acknowledging. And I said to somebody online yesterday that it was actually to SJV World Tour at Twitter. My opinion is the skill is focusing on the positive. Like we all see negative nonsense sent to us, constantly, like a fire hose. But the skill is being able to turn that off and focus on the good things, which we'll get into that a little bit in just after the next thing. But I think I'm very happy, and I think we all should be celebrating for Cuban Americans around the world, that it looks like the end is finally near. And I brought this up around the whole Cuba, Venezuela, even Canada, the approach that the Trump administration is taking towards geopolitics. How do you remember the frame? I gave it a name. I gave the name of the framing of the strategy that Trump is using. Do you remember what that is? Anyone? I see Beth is here, Maureen, Jess, Thomas, Jana. You guys are all spread out on all different feeds. It's wild. It's interesting to try to figure out which stream people are using. Everybody chooses, the preference that they're most consistent with. So, Maureen says Venezuela was a wonderful tourist destination in my 20s. Yes, it was. And Maureen, I think it's going to be that again. And hopefully you'll have a chance to go visit as Venezuela is rebuilding. And by the way, for those of you who are entrepreneurial, you want an opportunity to make money and to build a business and to have success, be one of the people who's going to take the risk to move to Venezuela to build something there as they revitalize their economy. I mean, that's how you gain massive success. But anyways, what's the framing that Trump has been using around these issues of Cuba, Venezuela, Canada, I guess Iran as well? It's the daddy frame, right? That's the common trend, that daddy's coming home. Scott Adams brought this up initially. And I think he's right because you can see this consistently. He's daddy behaving like spoiled children, and he's coming home to lay down the law and say, "Enough effing around, enough giving your mother a hard time. Daddy's home, and I'm going to spank you and keep you on a tight leash." Right? And this is why he's keeping them grounded. So people are like, "Oh, the U.S. is going to take over or not?" He's like, "No, he's going to keep them under a tight leash," which is, I think, is what he's doing. The human operating system, once you understand it, it's easy to modify the settings, as I said yesterday. So, what is Marco Rubio then in this daddy frame paradigm? Well, think about it, because we're going to get to that in a couple of minutes. From our friend online, who I just told you to follow, SJV World Tour on Twitter, on X, he brought up an interesting question, and my response was not a bit. It was an interesting framing, and we had a very short back and forth. But I brought up the idea around compartmentalization, which I think is the word that Candace Ovens, sorry, that Candace Ovens can say. But I'll give you an example of this. Like I realized this later in life when a friend of mine explained this to me. I had come back to Miami from Colombia as one of my closest friends. We're in the car together, and his work is busy, my life is busy, and we're just talking, that sort of thing. And he said to me, he always, if he always has a street light, he gets bored, puts down his cell phone, or at that time his BlackBerry. And he said to me, "Let me ask you something. How do you compartmentalize so easily?" I said, what are you talking about?" He says, "Nothing seems to bother you." He's like, "You just turn things off." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, doesn't anybody? Or doesn't everybody?" And he looked at me like, "What, are you crazy?" He was like, "What, you're thinking about work all the time?" And he said, "I don't stop thinking about work. I'm thinking about work when I go to bed, when I wake up." And I'm like, "That is not healthy, man. You need to learn how to shut yourself, how to shut it off, how to turn your brain off." And I've talked about on this stream before, you take that emotional state of distress or negativity, and you put it in a little box, take the key, you lock it, and you put it on the shelf, and you forget about it. And it doesn't exist until you want to address it again. In my case with work, it's usually the next morning. And he just looked at me like, "Wow." He said, I don't know if you're mentally unstable or brilliant, but one or the other. The idea is, I've had other friends ask me about how to do this, how to compartmentalize. And I think it's a skill, and maybe it's a skill I just naturally have. Um, but I think it's something we can do. And I know, for those of you who watched Scott Adams, he used to do these micro lessons. And because we have similar training in certain areas, not the MBA and stuff, but in the human dynamics space, shall we say? I was thinking about maybe I should do a micro lesson on compartmentalization. So if you think that's something I should do, then let me know. And maybe that will be one of these subscriber perks, is maybe I'll try doing some of these micro lessons around human behavior, and start with compartmentalization. I have a couple of ideas. I just haven't decided if I should do it. And if you think I should, then I will. Segmentation of events. Yes, it's very freeing. Yes, Maureen, you're pretty wise. You're very wise. It's, Canna Jess says she's got to go to church. All right, love you, dear. We'll see you sometime. We'll see you in the Discord. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to get into that I thought was fascinating, another sign of hope and positivity for the world, that we're going the right direction. There was an X account who, by the name of Banger Shell 11. I'm not sure what that means. It just doesn't seem to be inappropriate, so don't go in that direction. But the title of the post, and it had an image that supported it: Milei's deregulation of Starlink allowed over 1 million Argentinians to get access to the internet. And what's wild about it, it's like that map of Korea when you show South Korea is all lit up, and North Korea, the socialist paradise, is all dark because they can't even afford electricity and water. The map shows Argentina in, I can't remember which year it is. You can find it. I reposted it. Was it 2024, 2023 versus 2025 after the deregulation? And it's not quite as extreme as North Korea versus South America, but very similar. And in the Argentinian map, it's showing not electricity. What it's showing is internet access. And that is a massive deal in Latin America, more than people realize. So Latin America operates a little bit differently. Again, third world, different economics, larger poor classes, and different problems that they need to address. Because all those the century of socialism has done so well for Latin America. But did you know? I find this fascinating. So in Latin America, it's starting to change now. It's getting, well, at least in Colombia, it's gotten much cheaper. But for many, many years, uh, most people couldn't afford data for their cell phone. So they're walking around with usually cheaper Android phones, and they're always hunting for Wi-Fi signals because the only thing they could use their phone for was for a phone call or an SMS text message, with two exceptions, or one exception, depending how you look at it. And that was WhatsApp and Facebook. So if you got a non-data plan in Latin America, you could get a non-data plan, but they would give you, this was, I think, Movie Star was the first one, but they all did, Claro, Tigo, all of them. But you could get free usage of WhatsApp and Facebook. Somebody just died. Of WhatsApp and Facebook for free. So you didn't have data, but you had full data for Facebook and WhatsApp for free. That's why WhatsApp and Facebook is massive in Latin America. If you change your settings to Spanish, you'll see everybody is throughout Latin, and I think it's other parts of the third world as well. Because if you can't afford data, you would get it for free on these plans, presumably. So Facebook could leak all that data back to the carriers and then to the government, or the carriers could resell that information, right? Data harvesting on a massive scale in Latin America. But so it's just a completely different world and structure there. And I think that's a large part of what's kept Facebook afloat. Because, you look at Facebook, you think it's a ghost town. How does this company still have this massive valuation? Well, when all the carriers are paying for the free access to Facebook, well, that's why. Anyways, just thought that was interesting. Terrence Fisher is a gospel musician, or I guess a musician and music producer. And there's a video that I reposted yesterday on X, and I'll start getting more of these things into Locals and Substack, I promise. Just trying to figure out how to distribute equally across all these things, because I do want them to be the primary platforms. But he did this video I watched last night on AI music, and particularly he was using Suno, and it was really wild. The name of the what's it called? What was the name of it? I think it was new musicians are panicking about this new AI or something like that. It's in my feed, and basically he's in a home studio, and he's got. I mean, it looks like a sequencer, but it's actually the studio version of Suno, which is a sequencer like Pro Tools or Logic or all that sort of stuff. And he's just mapping out his evolution of dismissing AI music and to realizing, wow, we need to get on board with this, or we're cooked, as he said, because it's so good. It's quite amazing. And this is another example of how AI shows not that AI is so smart, but we are amazingly predictable. Our behavior is so predictable. And you even see this in the AI music space. So it's pretty wild just to watch him he took some of his old track. He's a gospel producer and singer now, but he used to do R&B when he was younger. So he took all these tracks from 20 years ago, I don't like R&B, so I'm like, but he does show when he takes his work and plugs it in to an AI music generator that basically modifies it the same way ChatGPT corrects your grammar, spelling, diction, punctuation, capitalization, all that sort of stuff, that you get an immensely better product. And this goes back to what I suggested to people who are afraid of AI or intimidated by it. Don't be intimidated by it. Just focus on areas of your life that maybe don't have massive implications, whether it's legal documents or banks or all the banking information, whatever. Okay, stay away from that and just use the artistic stuff, the music, the visual arts, that sort of thing. And that's what he's done. And now he's figured out three strategies of how he can incorporate AI into his business and into his workflow to make a better product and so it doesn't completely destroy his business. And I think we can. This is why I'm such a proponent of everybody trying it because I think it's really important. You can't. It's like you can't ignore the internet. The internet's not going away, but those who implemented the internet, or for example, in retail, those who implemented as part of their retail strategy, they implemented some sort of app or digital interaction with their client base. Those are the companies that survive the best, right? Genesis Starlink is beautiful freedom. Yes, it is. She said we were from okay. Well, we are from my family in. Okay, so you're from a Caribbean family. Um, oh, okay. So you communicate with your family in the Caribbean over it. What do you think about the high-speed train proposed from Markham to Ottawa? This is in parts of Canada. That's just money laundering. It's just what it is. It's money laundering. That's all it is. It's all our politicians do in Canada because we're a crime-ridden hellhole. And by crime, I mean also white-collar crime. So anyways, Terrence Fisher's video. I love you, Jenna. It's good to see you there. Um, so watch this video if you're so inclined. If you're nervous about AI, look how he's implementing it if you're in the music space. And I think that might help some people with some of the resistance they have around AI because AI is not going away. Unfortunately, for those of you who don't like it, unfortunately. So there's many different ways, many different ways to peel an onion. There's many different ways to implement it in a way that will hedge against the future potential negative impact of AI and negatively impacting your income. But if you get on board now, you'll have a better understanding and you'll be better secured in the future. Yana says AI is so awesome. Yes, it is. It is absolutely wild and life changing, and should help free up your space. You free up your space, your life. So Scott Adams' AI prediction I talked about a little bit yesterday, and his prediction, I think Elon and many of the technologists, philosophical technologists, talked about how in the future uh, phones will not have apps, or at least they'll have far fewer apps, and things will mainly be controlled by an AI. Now, I'm going to say something that some of you will disagree with. And this goes into we may love each other and we can still disagree and we can still love each other. But I'm just trying to give another perspective. And I know people are concerned with privacy. I am too. And definitely by some of the things that I and others have been involved with. ArriveCan money laundering scheme. Why has nobody gone to jail for that? Like how many billions were wasted on that? I think it was billions of dollars. Was it $40 billion that they just stole and laundered through a network of NGOs? But Canada doesn't have any it doesn't have any rules because everyone's a criminal in our politics, it seems. But anyways, so yes, I'm not a fan of especially the government, right? But with private entities, you at least, and I explained this in one of my interviews, you can't opt out of your government, but you can opt out of Facebook if you don't want to use it, right? And so the privacy and convenience, it's not an all or nothing. It's a slider. It's a trade-off. And most of life is trade-offs. That's just how things are, right? And I think most people who are obsessed with privacy, 80% of the internet is, I think the reason is because 80% of the internet is people looking at things they shouldn't look at or say they don't look at. And if somebody did it, if somebody found out, they would be embarrassed. Welcome to the human operating system again, right? How humans behave versus how humans should behave are two very, very different things. And the more people protest about things, the more embarrassed they likely are that they are somehow involved or interested in aforesaid thing. Okay. The point is, I learned from having family in law enforcement and many friends in law enforcement. And this is the part you're not going to like, but think about this. And this applies to me too. You're not that important. This is how it was described to me by somebody in law enforcement. A law enforcement's job is to focus on criminals. Now I get that the Twitter and the enforcement of speech on Twitter that comes from the wokies who have never arrested anybody and somehow climb the ladder and get into intelligence. I did a stream on that. We're going to cover that again in the future because it keeps coming up. So I get that. I understand that. But that's few and far between. And that's the woke political force, which is getting a pushback right now. That's the Rupert Lowe is a good example of the pushback. The point is, people in law enforcement, when they do surveillance and investigations on people, they know all people are fallible, and law enforcement is a disorganized mess, like all government is. Um, so there's always criminals amongst the political class, and that's why it's a disorganized mess. So when you have different police forces that share information, that refuse to share information, or there's red tape that's unnecessary, or there's friction within law enforcement, that's because there's criminals involved in politics who create these obstructions, so it becomes difficult for the mechanism of law enforcement to work. Every officer will complain about that. Every officer that's been in investigations or detective, whatever, they'll they'll say that in not too many words, right? Because there's an incentive for criminals to get involved in politics so they can push public policy in a way that criminal activity, some of it, or select criminal activity, is ignored. That's what organized crime does, right? I think we call it the city of Brampton in Canada, for those who don't know. Brampton's a criminal city. So we have entire cities that are run by criminals, organized crime, terrorist organizations, cartels. I mean, so it's not, but the point is people who are in law enforcement, like not a lower level, but, detective down, that sort of thing. Their job is not they don't care about you or I. And I know that doesn't give comfort to a lot of people. I get it because I am equally skeptical as well of government. But it's just interesting to have communications with people who are in that profession who get so frustrated when they think people always think we're looking at them. They're like, do you have any idea how disorganized we are and how much friction we have on the inside? And it's like, I don't really care what you're watching on the internet. It's none of my business. I don't care. I have 20 other cases I got to deal with right now of people who are very, very dangerous. And then one cop said to me, and living in my neighborhood, and I have kids. So that's my priority. So, anyways, it's pretty interesting to see um, this new era of computation where apps will slowly go away and will be replaced by AI. And I think keep your eye on OpenClaw because that's important to see. I think that's kind of the shift in the direction where things are going. And that was that conversation with the creator of OpenClaw with Peter Steinberger that kind of this is where this all started from. But yeah, Scott and Elon and many people, they have been acknowledging this is the direction we're going for some time. Okay, so before I know we're gonna get into Rubio and the Cowboy hat communism, which is really kind of freaky. But one more thing, so something that popped up: this Brazilian pilot, his name was Sergio. I don't know I don't know how to pronounce in Portuguese. In Spanish, it's Sergio Antonio Lopez. But I don't know. Portuguese always sounds like Spanish spoken by a Russian. You know, Sergio Antonio Lapoji or something like that. Anyways, he was a 70-year-old pilot, an airline pilot in Brazil, who was arrested on his plane. It looks like he was preparing to, was getting onto the plane and going to go take off somewhere. This is just developed right now, but just came on the radar this morning. So, 70-year-old airline pilot and a veteran airline pilot. And you think, what is still working for? You know? But, anyways, it's never who you think. Why? Because he was arrested on his plane for operating a child trafficking ring. Yeah, think about that. An airline pilot, a 70-year-old airline pilot, was operating a child trafficking ring. And this sometimes goes with sometimes people do things because they're evil. Sometimes people do things because they're evil and they have no choice. So a lot of that happens in the world, especially when in a place like Brazil, that's basically overrun by Hezbollah Islamists that are, I think, holding a gun to the government at this point. But hopefully that will be solved sometime in the near future. The point is, it's never who you think. That truth is stranger than fiction. And my question is, who's going to arrest our numerous Canadian politicians involved in human labor trafficking? You ask that again. When will the Canadian politicians involved in human labor trafficking be arrested? Because everyone in our parliament knows it's going on, and they all know who it is, including the conservatives. Sorry, I got to use it. They're just so weak. They're pathetic sometimes. They all know, but all they do is come up with excuses not to do something. When somebody from law enforcement, somebody from Intel brings it up, it's like, oh, yeah, but if we address this, we're going to lose the next election. No, you don't lose an election by being a coward. Sorry, you lose an election by being a coward. You don't lose an election by showing strength, right? Yes, I agree, Thomas. Unfortunately, no one's going to be arrested. Our legal system serves government more than our Western democracies. Well, I think that hopefully is going to be changing. But yes, you have politicians involved in human trafficking. And this is why I always laugh when I go to the airport and you hear that alert that, help the government fight human trafficking. If you see anything suspicious, report it to blah, 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 this number. It's like, just go to cabinet in Canada. Just go to the cabinet. Everyone knows. The Privy Council's got to know. Everybody knows. It's just wild. As I said, I think yesterday, that Canada is worse than Pablo Escobar's Colombia, right? Because at least when Pablo Escobar tried to get involved in politics, that was the end. That was a step too far. And the world of the United States particularly rallied against him and decided, okay, well, we've gone too far with this. Now we're going to put an end to it. So, Maureen dated a French RCMP officer for 3 years who oversaw operations in a place and in another place. Turned out to be a serious criminal. Went to prison. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Bob Dylan, everyone knows. I was a big fan of Bob Dylan growing up, but that's a whole other issue. All right, so I posted this this video and addressing this issue that I brought up recently, and that is the fake MAGA copycats. That phenomenon we're going to see on the left. Where is the left going politically? And I'm not the only one. There's other people who are very politically astute, who see the exact same thing is transitioning in politics in the Western world. And this was a post by Eric Doherty. And I should, you know what? I wonder, can I? Let me see if I can share a screen because it does have audio and video. And if I can get it, do you have patience for me to try? Because if you want me to, I'm going to give it a shot. Let me see if I can do this. Let's see how miserably this will fail, but maybe we'll have some success because there's a way to share screens here. So let me open up Twitter and we can look at this maniac. Those who can watch it and we can listen to it as well. It is quite funny to see some of this. Let me try. Let me scroll. All right, here, that's him. And there's the thumbnail. Where is Eric Doherty? I know I retweeted him on this. Did I not? Maybe it's lost. Oh, yeah, here he is. Here he is. Okay, let me first, let's make this. Oh, hold on. Okay, slow down. Slow down, Kelly, whatever your name is. He's so ramped up. It's like he's on Quaaludes or something like that. It's pretty funny. Okay, let me see if I can do this. Um, there's who knows if there's a way to start to share a screen. Okay, I'm going to allow the screen share and grab the tab to thing. Okay, do I put this in here? Uh, who else uses this encoder? Okay, that didn't work. We'll try one more time. If it doesn't work, I'll just play the sound. But I thought it should. Oh no, it's not a Chrome tab. All right, let me put it in Chrome. Apparently, I have to put it in Chrome. And let me try to. Is that it? No, that's not it either. I know this is riveting, watching me do basically tech support over the stream. But now I got to scroll down again to him. All right. This is. I think it's worthwhile just to watch these maniacs and see what they do. All right. So we'll try one more time, and if not, we'll have to give up on it. Come on. Wait. Oh yeah. Okay. Perfect. Let's make that maximize. All right. Whoa. Hold on. So, all right. I'm gonna go back to the beginning. All right. I think you can all see it. Share. Can you see it? I think. Do I have to go to? Yeah. There it is. Come on. We're so close with Rumble. I'm using Rumble Studio right now. For those who don't know. All right. Let's go. Oh, this was so close to, I probably should. I didn't think I was going to do this. That's why. All right. I'm going to try to just play this. Oh, here, presentation. There we go. I found it. All right. Tech support in the middle of the stream. All right. Let's listen to this. Is brilliant academic sharing his perspective on the world, and you'll understand why this is both a laugh and very concerning. This is the cowboy hat communism, I like to call it. So here we go. That's called pacing, what he's doing. He's trying to reach out to the MAGA people and saying, these are all the values that I have, that you have, that I'm going to mimic and pace you on them. Remember that. Now he's pacing the left. I'm just like people on the left. Name some identity groups that the left is obsessed with. All right, so he's now paced two groups. Patriots and freedom fighters. He's back to pacing the MAGA people. You see that? No, no, now the journalists are the heroes. Okay. Persecuted. So now we've entered the victimization frame. So we've paced both sides, and now we're going to appeal to victimization. We're going to try to pull the MAGA people over and say, you're victims too, Tucker Carlson. Oh, that's a perfect to freeze it. Okay, I gotta take a snapshot of that. That is perfect timing. What's interesting about this? I think we can go back and get away from that nonsense. What's interesting about? Well, let me go back to this. Is irrespective of the fact that he is about to go to a glory hole. Um, this is what's called portrayal. So this is acting. This is not authentic. And once you understand how people communicate and you understand their body language and their consistency. So I don't know his baseline, which is interesting because even though I don't know his baseline, I can see he's in portrayal. And the way I see it from him, and I wish I could. The problem is it's so slight, you can never really time it and stop it properly. It's when he pauses. People like that who are in portrayal, who are not professional actors, when they pause for like a millisecond, that's where you can see it. There's a look of doubt that overcomes their face because they're trying to sell something and they're trying to read the audience for a second to think, am I selling this? It's on a subconscious level, it's not on a conscious level. And he exhibits that two or three times when he pauses in between. And then he overcompensates by being way more emotive than he needs to be, right? Um, he can barely come up for air. This is portrayal by a non professional actor. So this goes back to the whole idea and what I'm trying to warn people about so you can see it is this is this is the tactic that's going to be used by the left. Now you go back and watch it and look at the pauses in between and look at the inauthenticity. It's one of those things that I love this expression. I get it from Plinkett in Red Letter Media, but so appropriate for many things you see, especially in politics. It's one of those things that you didn't see it, but your brain did. And you can tell because you get this feeling like something's inauthentic, something's incongruent. I'm sure if you go back and you watch this, you're going to see that incongruency and you'll understand it's not authentic. You probably, if you watched this before, you probably felt it, but couldn't articulate it because we often can't articulate what our subconscious is thinking. But that's what, so they are going to try this. They are going to try to sell this narrative of the cowboy hat communism to try to chip off away from MAGA, the the populist sort of more anti-establishment libertarian types, and they're going to use this guy and people like him to do it, and it's going to work for the people who don't understand what's going on, which is why I bring this up, right? But and he might not have started that way, might not have been a political operative, and he did this thing. He stormed into a church or something. Just the stupid stuff that the crazy people on Night Court would do. For hopefully some of you know that reference from the 1980s sitcom, which was brilliant. But he could have just been one of those maniacs, and he probably was, and he got captured by one of the political cartels, right? In this case, the far left one. That's who they look for. They don't look for reasonable people like myself or yourself. They look for crazy people because crazy people can be fueled into being very emotive. They can be very easily emotionally manipulated, and they are often incentivized by their ego, which is what that is. And you see that all over the place. We saw that in Canada during the trucker convoy when some of the maniacs, obsessed with the Jewish conspiracy, showed up to try and target and smear the Canadians, the Canadian truckers. They were brought in by, and I know the people who did it. They were brought in by one of them got the Order of Canada, by the way. I think it was the Order of Canada Jubilee or something like that. Anyways, they are the fixers that bring in, that recruit these maniacs. They give them a few $100 and say, we're really inspired by you. And only a maniac would think a maniac inspires people, right? And that's more of how they subvert grassroots movements. So it's people like him, and it happens on all sides, which is the whole point of why I want to bring this up so you can all see it. Lastly, Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio gave a brilliant speech in Europe, and do you remember Trump's frame? How he treats Venezuela and Canada and Cuba and Iran, all the countries that are causing problems right now in the world. How does he treat them? Remember, Trump is the daddy frame guy, right? Daddy's come home, and it's time to cut out the nonsense and treating them like spoiled children. So, to Rubio, a couple of things. Did you notice the standing ovation? What was that about? Trump got a standing ovation at the World Economic Forum, and now Rubio gets a standing ovation. It's called a tell. It's called a tell. They know exactly what's going on, and they know what they're doing to their country. And sometimes it's systemic, and there are people within the system who want to push back, but they don't have the political capital to do so. And they're very frustrated themselves. That's why, we talk about the political establishment. It's not an on or off thing. It's dynamic, and it's very complex. Like most systems in the world are complex. Let me go back to my thing here. Where's the Substack window? This is what happens when I start playing with new things in the middle of the stream, but I learned something new. All right, so Thomas, Red Letter Media is awesome. Yes, for those who haven't watched, if you are a Star Wars fan, but the prequels ruined your life, go back and watch the Red Letter Media review of the Star Wars prequels. They are better than the movies themselves. You will die laughing, and it's hours and hours and hours of commentary, and it's absolutely brilliant. So glad to see there's another Red Letter Media fan here as well. So back to Marco Rubio, he talked about something that I thought was very important that I haven't heard anybody else talk about, so I'll bring it up. So you can go watch the speech. I'm sure you'll all like it. That clearly was a presidential speech. That was practice, that he is going to run with the intention of running for president. And my guess is he's going to have a lot of support from Trump. I could be wrong, but that's kind of how I see it. So anyways, one of the things I love about Marco Rubio, by the way, he addresses what I talked about last stream. He dispels the inaccurate framing that the racist and Hollywood central casting give. They treat Latinos like they're all ghetto trash, and they're all part of a gang, and everyone's like a reggaeton, ghetto, thug, whatever. That is the complete opposite of what Latin America is. Latin America is like us. Particularly in the cities amongst the big business and educated class, they're no different than us. And in fact, I think Canada's much worse. Canada has a much worse organized crime issue than most places in Latin America. But this is what Hollywood central casting does to minorities. They don't just do it to Latino communities. They also do it to the various different Black communities. There's not one Black community. They're very different. There are people from the Caribbean. There are people from Africa. People speak French. People speak English. People speak Portuguese. from the certain parts of Africa, and it's kind of insulting how simplistic and stupid Hollywood central casting can be. But that's the kind of racist framing they have, and I think that's probably why they're obsessed with DEI, because I think they know it subconsciously. It's not a conscious awareness; it's a subconscious awareness, and that's why they triple down on DEI, because they project their obsession with race onto the left and their followers instead of acknowledging their lack of education and understanding of human nature, which is what Marco Rubio addressed in his speech, the human nature part. And I love this. He talked about, and by the way, we're not, the people on the right and the left both have flaws, which is what I'm going to address. And some of you may not like some of this, but I'm trying just to call balls and strikes. And if you disagree, great. But this is, I think, very important for us to understand and get more people to establish consensus and help unbrainwash some of the people who've fallen victim to the far left nonsense. So Rubio talked about the cultural origins of America, and he talks about the Scots-Irish. He talks about the French. He talks about the various European cultures that settled America and the Western world over hundreds of years, right? This is why, for me, the white people victimization frame is infuriating. And I get it. I get it too, right? I receive it as well. So I understand the the emotion that motivates it, the frustration. I get that. But in the example of the United States, we'll talk about Canada another time. But in the example of the United States, it was created not by white people, but by Quakers and Puritans and Scots-Irish and French and the Dutch and the Spanish, many other cultures. They weren't white people. They were all different. They all had different cultures that they came from, but they aligned on the principles of value, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And the pursuit of individual happiness, and to get away from authoritarianism, to get away from monarchies. Do you know what that's called when people refer to white people as a group? This collectivist framing of white people, what's that called? I just said it. You might not have realized I said it. That is collectivism. That's right. That is the communist framing that has started infecting the US from the 1960s. This is why people like, Nick Fuentes, for example, like I knew he was a communist because he uses communist language. He refers, firstly, he's Latino himself, but he's LARPing as a white supremacist for, I don't know, for money. But that's the frustration of the white people smear. That comes from low IQ communist trash. That's where it comes from. They don't address Scots-Irish versus Yankees versus Puritans versus Southerners. They don't do that. It's just they collectivize. Everybody's just all white people. And this is why the woke right are leftists, because they have the same philosophical framing of the world. And they use that to bias towards victimization. It's lazy and it's inaccurate. Again, I understand the frustration when you see, communist institutions like Canada's CBC, that they make job applicants cannot be Caucasian. By the way, brown people are also considered Caucasian, but they're the ones who are defining this whole category because they're communists and they're completely disrespectful to the cultural spectrum of people who were Caucasian but came from all different cultures that settled the Western world. And the people who play the victimization of white people are buying into it. They're selling the communist framing. Stop it. You're more enlightened than that, right? It's your value system that is what's common, that we share, right? I know it might be too academic for some of them to understand this, but this is an important part to understand. Don't buy into communist framing. You cannot win against communism and collectivism by becoming a communist and collectivist yourself, right? And I think Marco Rubio is a good, perfect example of somebody who pushes back against that because he doesn't wear the Latino flag wherever he goes. He's American, right? He's got American worldviews and American values. Yeah, his family descended from Latin culture. And by the way, so many Latinos are because they're descendants of from Spain. Yeah, they're Caucasian like everybody else, but who cares? It's irrelevant. It's their value system that's important. That's why the Islamists are so toxic because they have alien values. That is a parasitic value system to Western liberalism because it's entirely collectivist, just like the communists. That's why they play off each other. They have the same philosophical framing of the world. And this is what people need to learn and understand. The other point about Marco Rubio is remember Trump's daddy frame? Right? He's the daddy who's coming home to spank everybody who's behaving like a spoiled brat, right? All right. Labels simply simplify the complex world. Yes. And inaccurately. That's the problem, right? Okay, so if Trump is the daddy, who's Marco Rubio? What's his framing? And I think I know what his framing is, and it may have something to do with his generation and his upbringing. Think about this. Tell me if I'm wrong. Just sit back and think about it. Close your eyes if you need to. Trump is the daddy frame. You know who Marco Rubio is? He's Uncle Jesse from Full House. Think about that. John Stamos, Uncle Jesse. For those of you who watched Full House as a kid, I didn't really watch much of it, but I'm aware of it. Marco Rubio is the Uncle Jesse in this paradigm. Think about that. You feel it, don't you? Sounds about right. And maybe kind of how they look is similar-ish. Their framing of who they are in this dynamic. Trump is the daddy. Marco Rubio is Uncle Jesse. Empathetic. We love you, but you have to stop destroying your culture. We want to help you. Wasn't Uncle Jesse like that? Right? Wasn't he like the cool uncle that the kids could talk to and not have fear of reprisal the way they'll have fear of reprisal from Trump? I think that's who Marco Rubio is on the political stage. He's Uncle Jesse. If you put that in your mind. And I think he's going to evolve. So I think Marco Rubio right now is the Uncle Jesse of international politics, and he's going to evolve into another character. Do you know who that is? Think about it. We're going to talk about that next time. It's going to be a character from a movie or a series of movies from the 1990s. And I think when I tell you, you probably won't be able to shake it. But Marco Rubio as Uncle Jesse in Geopolitics, who's going to help, they're going to do a little bit of the good cop, bad cop. Trump is the bad cop, the daddy, who's not going to put up with any of your BS. Uncle Jesse feels the same way, but he's going to be empathetic. And he's going to work with you and tell you that he loves you, which is what Marco Rubio just did when he gave his speech yesterday. So it's just very fascinating. Uncle Jesse or protective big brother. That's a good way to describe him as well. Yeah. Maureen says, I'm of Scotch, Irish, Swedish. Trump is Scottish. That's right. You're not just white. You're something more complex than that. And the communist framing strips away at your cultural heritage. I'm not saying go all identity politics. That's not the point. But it's just sad to see people who come from, Irish descent, Scotch Irish descent, who then just start classifying themselves as just white, like a bunch of communists would classify them. Like, don't do that to yourselves. That's my opinion. Thomas says the woke right is collectivist. Rather than be obsessed with white people, they are obsessed with the JQ. Well, that's another issue. We'll talk about that. There's a reason that goes on, but that's anyways. So in closing, I think all of this is positive. We see how the world is changing. Look how inspiring Marco Rubio's speech was yesterday. Rupert Lowe gave his the unveiling of his party, did that video, very inspiring. Jeremy Clarkson may join it. I got one or two policies that I'm like, well, we got to talk about that, but uh, I'm 98% there with them. Uh, so Restore Britain is formalized. Marco Rubio is addressing the Europeans with empathy and getting a standing ovation. Much like Trump got a standing ovation at the World Economic Forum. So everybody knows. But most people in politics, they're afraid to say anything. And they're afraid to say anything for a bunch of reasons, reasons that we often don't consider. And those are the pressure points. We'll talk about those in a future stream. But I think all of this lays a perfect foundation to start to reach your friends or family who bought into the woke nonsense, who I think are starting to come out of it. John Cleese is a good example. John Cleese is still no conservative, but speaking openly about what's happened in England on certain issues, he sounds like Tommy Robinson. So he's now aware and will and said, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to speak up and I'm going to say what I feel and I don't care what anyone thinks. And I think you're going to likely see the woke left. You know what they're going to do? They're going to dial back because that's how the human operating system works. That's how we function. My concern is that they're going to replace it, as we addressed, with cowboy hat communism. So it's upon us right now to explain to the people who bought into the woke left stuff or starting to understand how the world works in terms of communications and manipulation and say, yeah, this is what they did for the past 15 years. Guess what? This is what they're going to do now, and don't buy into it. So you need to get ahead of it. And I think if we work to get ahead of it by being empathetic with people we disagree with, then I think you're going to see a lot of people come back to like a pragmatic center where we don't agree on everything, but we don't agree on everything, but we agree on the fundamentals and the most important parts. Arthur B. Grant, you're not a proud white Canadian. You're what? What kind of? Were you Irish? Were you French? Were you British? What culture are you from? Because white Canadian is communist framing. That's the point. You know, I can think about like when my grandfather was younger, and I remember he used to tell us these stories. Like Irish people were treated like garbage. They're just treated like absolute garbage. Like they were third class citizens. So were Italians. Are Irish people not white? But they were treated like crap by other white people. So we got to get away from collectivism because collectivism will eat the right. It'll eat the right like it ate the left. And I don't want to see that happen to people who are pragmatic, who just want the world to be a better place, right? Thomas, I started referring to myself as Hungarian and English personally. Well, I think it's your identity is Canadian, but when it comes to your cultural heritage, if that's ever important, it's not your family's cultural heritage, then that's when you bring it up. But it should not be relevant. What should be relevant is that you're Canadian because you have your Canadian value system aligned with freedom. That's who defines who you are, right? Um, yeah, and I'm Latina. Sí, eres muy Latina. All right, so I have to run right now. And by the way, like I don't go around and tell people unless it's necessary that between me and Nick Fuentes, that fraud, I'm the Anglo-Saxon. He's not, right? I'm not going around and like it's so crazy. So crazy people are. Yes, genetically that's what I am. But that's a whole other story for a whole other time. I hope this, is becoming a place where we're all coming together and talking about some of these issues. Yeah, we don't always agree, but I think we're all on the same side, and we just want the craziness in the world to stop. And I think we're seeing so many signs that it is stopping. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a decade, maybe. It's going to take a considerable amount of time to fix the decades of collectivism that have destroyed the West. But I think we're well on our way. And I think we have a lot to be thankful for. And I'm gonna end there. I gotta run. I got a ton of stuff to do today. But remember, be kind to people and be kind to those you love and be kind to strangers as well. And tonight, not on record at 8 p.m. And hopefully, we'll see you. Come join the live chat on YouTube if you're free. And it's our 200th episode, and I know it's going to be pretty. It's an interesting episode. I think you'll find it interesting. It'll be interesting for people who are interested in understanding how the legal system works and how to push back against it. All right, I got to run. I love you all, and I will talk to you soon. Okay.